All right. Hey, say good morning. It's noon now. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's call. We are going to be covering fall container gardens today with Peg. This is part one of two parts. So we'll be back. I think it's next week. I have to pull the calendar up to double check, but we'll be back soon.
It
is next week.
We're going to do part two, actually.
I was going to say, I should know this since I look at the calendar all the time. So this is part one of two parts. Peg is going to be covering both, and then next week she's going to be bringing on our colleague Andy to discuss some of the containers and amendments and soils and that kind of thing, as I understand it. So this should be a good pair of classes to join us for. If you are new to these programs, welcome. I'm going to go over a few notes for you guys. So for everybody who has attended these classes in the past, as always, welcome back, and just bear with me for the next minute. For those of you who are new, this is a Zoom webinar. It is not a Zoom meeting. So we can't see you or hear you during this class. If you have questions, you'll hit that Q&A button on your menu, type those questions in, and then when Peg takes questions at the end of the class, I'll be relaying those to her. If you need anything during the class, you can use the chat box and send me a chat, and I can help you if you have any issues that come up. I'm happy to help you guys if I can. We are recording this class, so if you have to leave for any reason during it, feel free to let us know. We'll send you a copy of the recording. And I believe that covers it. Peg, as always, I know you really need no introduction. You do a lot of classes for us and have for many years. So a reminder to people who have not been in a class with Peg before. Peg works at our Fair Oaks store. She's been teaching for us for a long time. She brings a ton of expertise for container gardens, annuals, perennials, really a little bit of everything. She used to do our Gardening Advisor TV show. So welcome, Peg. Welcome back. And I'm going to let you get started.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm just surrounded by color, by fall color. And this is really just a small sampling of the things that are available. But where do I begin when I've got so much beauty around me? I think that I'll begin with mums, because mums just automatically say fall to me, to everyone. And when we begin to bring them in, if fall begins for me. I love them. You can expect 3 to 4 weeks of color from the mums. And the majority of what we carry are what we call cushion mums. And they have been pinched a couple of times at least so that they have a definite rounded form. And they really are beautiful. I didn't bring up any of the big ones because I had so many other plants to show you also. There just wasn't space. But I did bring up one of the small ones. And the value of these small ones is that you can tuck them into a larger container with other plants, some that perhaps will go through the winter even, and enjoy that color, and then slip it out, give more room for the other things to grow. And you can, if you have the space, you can tuck it into your garden. Now, will these cushion mums be hardy? Will they live over winter and come back next spring? We're not totally sure about that. Certainly don't guarantee it, because they've done a lot of hybridizing with these mums. And most of the time they'll come through, but not necessarily. But let me tell you about one that will. And these I have in my garden. I have several varieties. These you will find in the perennial section. And they certainly can be used in your containers also. This one is not showing heavy buds yet. They usually bloom a little later in the season. They are very hardy, and normally they are much looser in their form. If you are growing these in the garden It's good to pinch them just once when they are 5, 6 inches tall, because that will make them a little denser, but they won't have that rounded form. And the more informal look does fit a lot of gardens. And it also works well in perennial beds, but you can use them in your container gardening also. So you will find these varieties in the perennial section. And there's the difference between those two mums. This one is possibly hardy, but not necessarily. And oftentimes people use a lot of them to decorate with, knowing that they will simply treat them as if they were a fresh cut arrangement and dispose of them afterwards. Okay, so there's great value to that. Another thing, of course, that says fall to me is when the gourds and the pumpkins come in, because they are a wonderful accessory to your container gardening right through Thanksgiving. And if you spray them silver and gold or bronze, they can even go through Christmas, you know. And when I throw them into my mulch pile, I often get little seedlings that come through and kind of wrap around in the edge of the woods where my mulch containers are, okay? So that's just the beginning. Let's talk a little bit. In fact, let's bring up that first picture, Kelly. This container size, I'm not going to go into the how-to with container until we go through some of the plants that you can use in these containers for some longevity. So let's talk, however, about size. Size matters. You would have difficulty getting small containers through the winter. And I'm talking about enjoying these things in fall, but also having them go through and into the winter. So you would need a minimum of like certainly 12 inches on the small side, but it might make it. It would need to be larger than that generally. And so the size of that container would give you the liberty of growing 2 or 3 different types of plants in there. This particular one has pansies. It has the little grassy chorus, which will still be attractive right through the winter. And the pansy should overwinter. They won't be as vigorous in the really cold periods of time, but they'll be beautiful in the fall and then beautiful again in the spring, with some presence through the winter also. And in that container also is a kale. And let's talk a little bit about kale and cabbage. They are certainly sought after. They do a lot of bedding with these things. I enjoy them tremendously in containers, and I do put some in the ground in my little garden beside the road. I choose to use kale. Cabbage is beautiful, and a lot of people love it. It's a little different, but kale will go through the winter. It takes more of that deep cold than the cabbage do. So I lean to that. But let's come back to me for a minute, Kelly. There is one thing, because it's still warm and we still have butterflies out, and I want to be very specific about this. I don't go putting stuff to kill the larvae of butterflies, except the cabbage fly, the cabbage butterfly will lay on all the brassicas, that is the kale, the cabbage, the spinach, all of that sort of thing. And then their little caterpillars will just eat. Really nasty, okay? Now, the beauty of it is I'm going to suggest that, and this is a biological thing, it's organic. It doesn't hurt the birds and the bees, and only that cabbage worm. It's not, this is not specific. It's the plant that's specific. Those butterflies, the cabbage butterflies, go to this plant. Other butterflies do not go to this plant. They have specific plants that they go to lay their caterpillars on. So you don't have to worry about killing those beautiful butterflies by using this product. But you need to use this right now while it's hot, both on your vegetables and on this. It is organic. You probably needs to be reapplied about weekly or every other week. And it comes in a dust now, and it's also available in a spray. And it's very easy and safe to use. But if you don't, you're going to have the caterpillars destroy the look of this and the food growing part of that, okay? So that being said, let's talk about some of the things that are available in addition to the...
Hey, I'm sorry, can you repeat the name of that dust so I can spell it for everybody? What's the brand?
Well, it's Bacillus thuringiensis, but don't worry about that. You can either call it BT or Dipel.
Okay.
BT is easier. That stands for Bacillus thuringiensis, okay? And it is organic, it is biological, and it will not hurt your birds or any other of the butterflies, okay? So what would we combine? I don't think, this is a little heavy for me to lift, but I did put together a container here, and this is probably 14 inches, and it has a beautiful hoopora coral bells in it. And it will look lovely in the winter time and then revive and look even more beautiful. May have to remove a few leaves here and there now and then. There's also an evergreen fern, brilliant in the back, Dryopteris brilliant. And this will just get even larger and is evergreen. So that will go through the winter also. As to give it a little height, I tucked in this lovely, some people call it the brain celosia, but it's really beautiful, and it will go until frost kills it. And actually you can go out and cut those blossoms before the frost if you know it's coming, and you can hang dry them, and it stays just beautiful as a dried flower. Cleome makes a, not Cleome, I'm so sorry. Coxcomb makes a great dried flower. So that will definitely be an annual. Another thing that says, I've got one over here that you can see closer. The peppers, the ornamental peppers are absolutely stunning. And this one will go with first frost. One of the neat things is that I have actually a number of containers in my driveway, which is a gravel driveway. And this will drop its seeds and often come back as volunteers the next summer, which is kind of fun, you know, to have them growing. Or before frost, you can save some of the mature pieces and save those seeds and use them again. That's kind of fun. I always enjoy doing some of that. You know, I love the reseeders. So, and then we have violas, and then we have the variegated ivy here coming over. So we have the violas that'll go through winter, the ivy, the coral bells, and the fern. You will enjoy having this look like fall, but when frost takes it out, all these things just have more room to grow. And so you can enjoy some of these things that will go with the first frost and have those. Now, as far as the violas and the pansies are concerned, let's talk about those because they play a major role in this fall gardening thing. I am very, very fond of the violas. For me, they outperform the pansies, but I have to have some pansies also. These really put on a great show and will continue to grow and flower into the winter. They're going to slack up a little bit in the heavy cold and then start back gangbusters in the spring. I like to include, because of the size difference, the violas are always smaller and they have a tendency to really fall out of the container and trail a bit more than the pansies do. But I love to combine a few of the pansies also because that gives you that contrast of size there. And so they look really, really pretty. So these are going to continue to grow. And when you have things like petunias, now you may say to me, petunias are definitely a summer flower. Not necessarily. Petunias will take light frost. In fact, they love the cool weather and will thrive in the cool weather. And so within that container, you could have 2 or 3 violas and pansies. You could include the beauty and the size too of the petunia. You could even throw in, for more purple, a repetition of the pansy and the viola, an aster. Now, asters are like the months. They have a period of bloom, and usually it's 3 or 4 weeks. One thing about the asters, they are perennial, okay? And so if after it's finished blooming, you lift it out of the container, if you have a place to plant it, you can put it in the garden and it will come back next year. Most of the time, okay? No guarantees, okay? But now you've got violas. You have 2 things that are not going to go through the winter flowering. But you could, if you wished and your container were big enough, Kelly, hand me that. Yeah, we've got some gorgeous colors here. Let's take this one away for a moment and look at the fall color of this one. What is its name? I can't keep up. There's so many. It's called a Super Cal Cinnamon. Oh, it's typical. It is cinnamon, isn't it? All right, let's leave cinnamon in there. Now, there's the grass that you like down there, Kelly. I love these small grasses because they don't overwhelm the containers. Now, you can usually, your larger grasses if you've got really big containers, okay? This one is Carex Prairie Fire. So it has, it's greenish, got a bronzy cast to it, and it will go through the winter also. So now you've got maybe a mum or an aster. You've got a petunia that's going away, and then you've got plenty of room for that beautiful grass to grow larger and the pansies and violas to grow around it. I love this grass. This grass is also beautiful in the garden in masses, pretty much masses of maybe 3 or grouping, shall we say. Certainly one could do massings, but a lot of us don't have room for that. So I would say in a border that you have that's 15 feet long, like a townhouse might be, you could do 3s and then elsewhere repeat 2 others. And that's a beautiful, beautiful addition to a garden. Now, while we've got this grouping up, Kelly, reach, that's great. Thank you so much. Again, sun, full sun or shade. This one is really magnificent. And it's like a liriope, but it's black mondo. and it will go through the winter. And look what that does. I love using these in containers. They work really well if we take this mum away. Yeah, Kelly, I'm using you a lot to reach for these things, aren't I? And bring in one of the coral bells. It's very pretty. Now everything except the petunia is going to go through the winter. Let's see, there's another. I brought up small plants. We have big ones of these too, but it was much, I've got so much up here, it was easier for me to deal with the smaller plants. Look at this particular one. Okay, that's a beauty, isn't it? And it does a color pickup with that black mondo grass. M-O-N-D-O, black mondo. I also enjoy using the black mondo as a ground cover in my garden. And it can be used in small masses at the front of the border to give a wonderful contrast of color to whatever's grown behind it. Look what this does in this area. Look how it pairs with this, wow, kale. This has got to be my absolute favorite kale. It's red boar, R-E-D-B-O-R. Look how pretty that is together. But you want to add something perhaps with a, what shall we add? With a little bit more color. Oh, to drape out of things and to be a little bright, you could use this as a trailer, okay? I'm hiding something here. There we go. And accessorize and pick up the yellow with the pumpkins. So that works really well. And I'm fascinated with this particular one. It's called the Twisted Red Celosia. And you probably can't see the intense color of that one, but it's coming out, as you see, it's going to be more than just this tall thing. It's coming out all along these little internodes here, and it's going to be very full. And before frost hits, when it's predicted, before frost hits, I would cut this and hang dry it, and then use it as a dried flower. Okay, let's take a little break from this, Sally, and show them a few of the pictures, not just of what you use. Let's go there. Not just what you use, but where you use it. In this particular picture, I actually took last fall in our annual section here at Fair Oaks. And I had used a lot of the small evergreens. Now we do have the dwarf forms of evergreens, but we also have the small containers of evergreens that are not necessarily dwarf, but that are beautiful in containers. And when you grow them in containers, it does restrict their growth a little bit, okay? But it's amazing how long you can use those in containers, and they're beautiful. But next week, Andy and I will be talking a little bit more about containers with evergreens or with shrubs in them and how you winter them. I'm not going to address that today because we have so many of these combinations that we want to talk about. And we did break this up into a two-part series. So we will discuss next Thursday the different types of containers that are available for use and how you need to treat them in the winter time. And also a little bit more about the soils, perhaps, but more than anything about those containers and how to get them through the winter. So we're not going to talk very much about evergreens in them today, but let's go to the next one, Kelly, and show how the various people have used these. This was a client that we actually went out and did those really big containers that are at the top. They have used mums very effectively here. because they're nice broad steps and they don't interfere with people going up and down, unless of course you have to grab the rails, and if you need to do that, you might just want to have them on one side. But they've used them as a wonderful decorative unit here. And then in the back, there are the combination planters, and they are in large containers. And no, we did not put things in the bottom to restrict the amount of soil. It is filled with soil. However, you can use some things in the bottom somewhat to raise the soil. Just bear in mind that the more soil you have, the deeper the roots can grow and the less you'll have to water. Because watering in the wintertime is not as critical. I actually don't normally have to water after the winter really sets in. They pretty much take care of themselves unless we had some really unique dry spell. I never have actually gone out and watered them. Okay, with these big containers, I did not bring one up, but we have in the greenhouse actually wonderful, what would you call those? The trays with the wheels on them, Kelly. They have, you can sit these plants on and they on wheels, but it doesn't hold water, okay? And you can move containers somewhat if you need to clean under them or do that sort of thing. Or I do have a little dolly at my house to move heavier plants around, or you just simply get somebody to help you move them, you know. But I do rely upon a dolly to help me move some of the heavier things, or simply know where I want to put it and figure that I'm not going to move it. Well, let me come back to Kelly, me for a minute, and let's talk about containers since we already are on the container subject. Now, I brought up this little pot because I knew I was restricted in space. Size matters. This is not a pot to expect something to overwinter in. In fact, it's not necessarily a pot that somebody would expect something to summer over in, because it would dry out very quickly, unless, of course, it's succulents or something that likes it dry, or that you have it very convenient where you're going to watch the watering. But if you've got little ones, young ones, and you're teaching them, don't give them a little pot, because it will dry out too fast. And if they don't succeed, they won't do it again, okay? But I wanted to show you that in the summertime only, I do use saucers under a lot of my containers, because it helps with the watering. When it's upper 80s and into the 90s, it's difficult to even keep a large pot going this time of the year, particularly once the root systems of all those really get growing into that, they use up a lot of water. And it takes almost daily, every other day with some of the larger pots, and certainly maybe every 2 to 3 days if it's in shade, okay? But if it's in direct sun, you're going to have to water. And I love the help of the containers. I like to always use pot feet, or use that tray that you sit them on. But when winter comes and we get freezing weather, you do not want a saucer under your pot, because if you do, it's going to collect water and it will cause the pot to break. So don't do it. Now, some people will say to me, "Ooh, that's a mosquito breeder." Well, it isn't for me. I have plenty of mosquitoes, unfortunately. I lessened that quite a bit by using the mosquito bits and traps, but I never will be rid of them because I have a small creek going through the property, and you can't control that. But the mosquitoes don't breed in my saucers, because those containers are using up that saucer water on a daily basis when it's hot. And so they have to be in that water for a few days before they even are are going to survive, okay? So I don't have to worry about that with saucers because those plants are using up the water. Now, how do I pot it up? Let's pretend that this is a larger container. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You have to have hose drainage in the bottom unless you're doing water plants. And then I use landscape fabric because it's, some people say, well, they put a coffee filter or whatever over it. Fine, that may work for you. This is better for me and I can reuse it. We actually cut those big rolls into 1 yard pieces to make it easy and affordable for those who don't have a lot of containers. And so I will cut a piece of this landscape fabric that fits over the hose of whatever container I am using and place that in the bottom first. Okay. And then I will choose a very good potting soil to fill it at least 2/3 of the way up here before I put my plants in. And all potting soils are not created equal, and we will be talking a lot more about potting soils next week and which ones do you use. I actually, Maryfield Garden Center has a good potting soil. Fox Farm is a great one. Espoma, we have a lot of good potting soils. Potting, not planting. There's a difference. Planting soil is for planting plants in the ground outside. Potting soil is for containers, and there is a difference, okay? And so I would fill it 2/3 full, and then I would use, and I don't think I even brought that up. Oh yes, I did. It's just a bigger container. Excuse me. I'm sold on this Espoma plant tone. It's all organic. It's very slow release. And I mix according to the pot size in that 2/3. I put my fertilizer, okay? You can also use an organic that says it's an application for 3 months. It pelletized. And it's probably like Osmocote, which is an inorganic and very good, that can be used, that is pelletized and is sensitive to heat with the release of those fertilizers, okay? So there's a number of things. I also like to use a liquid fertilizer, and Bloom Booster is very good. I don't fertilize heavily in the fall. I might use it at half strength because you don't want to push these plants too hard. You want them to go into winter hardier. And if you push them too hard by fertilizing every week, then they might not make it as well. So I slack up a little. I love to use the plant tone and need to have that in that container because it's slow release. It's going to last for a long period of time. But I may also use Bloom Booster every couple of weeks, half strength, to give them some nourishment without overdoing it. Okay, so I'm not going to dwell anymore on that right now. Let's go back to our pictures. I really enjoyed doing this house, and actually we did some video work here, and I went over and helped to set up some of the decor there. And there are mums actually planted in the ground there, and a few of the kale planted in the ground, but there is repetition, and it doesn't really show it terribly well in this picture, but it was the best I could do picture-wise. There's also mixed containers going up the steps, but particularly back by the door. And there's a mixture of stacks of pumpkins and gourds and so forth. Now you would say those plants that are back beside the door that also have mums in them is a lot of shade. Well, you don't have to worry about sun or shade with the mums at this time of the year because their buds are already set. They're going to do their thing regardless of where you put them. So you don't have to worry about that. If you have a lot of other mixed plants there, you might want to enjoy them by the door for a couple of weeks and then move them closer to the front of the porch so that they would get some sunshine over the winter as far as placement is concerned. Okay, next one here. We still are always concerned about our pollinators. And I think every time we plant, we need to think about that. And this is an aster, and there are a lot of perennial asters in the perennial section and different colors, and they really say autumn to me, and they're a wonderful blend in the perennial border. They're also attractive in containers, but do remember that in a container, their flower power is only good for 3 or 4 weeks, but they still will feed those, particularly the bees and so forth, because they'll linger longer than the hummingbirds. I'm enjoying my hummingbirds very, very much and enjoying the few monarchs that I have. But it won't be terribly long before they're going to head south. So I still have to think about all the other pollinators that we have around, particularly the bees. Now, in the next picture, this chrysanthemum is actually growing in the ground around my containers. It chose to be there because it is a seedling. Now you say to me, "Ooh, I really want one of those beautiful yellow mums." Well, we don't have those because that one seeded itself there and it was so lovely. And I didn't pinch it. I just let it scramble among the containers. And it's so enjoyable. And it bloomed for a long time. And all I did when it was finished was just cut it back. And then it came back the next year, which was kind of fun. And so those containers are obviously potted up to go through the winter. They have a lot of kale in them. We've got stacks of pumpkins that always say fall to me and go right through Thanksgiving. And there is that grouping there. That grouping right now is completely planted for the hummingbirds particularly, but for everything else also, because I can see that grouping from my front porch. Now, all of that contains petunias and salvias, particularly lantana. My lantana at the moment is just gorgeous. I had intended to put a picture of it in here and I kind of forgot. But I'm not going to take those plants out. So what I have done is, and let's come back to me for a minute. What I have done is in a little bit smaller container so that when I'm ready to dispose of those, all I have to do is slip this one out and put it in those pots. What I have done is in some other containers in a grouping where they get sunshine and I can keep them watered. I am going to plant the red borer, and I'm going to plant some of the lower, this gets tall. This one stays more rounded. It's a peacock kale, but it's beautiful color. So I have planted some of those in the center, and then I have surrounded them with violas and pansies, and they're growing on right now where I can enjoy them, but in a different spot. And when that lantana and those things are kind of finished and I'm ready to change up, I'll take those out and I'll just slip that in and it's good to go. So that's how I enjoy container gardening a lot. Okay, there's another way that I enjoy container gardening. And that's when I plant up. And I don't know why. Here again, it's this COVID thing. It's this transportation thing. We keep expecting every day our big shipment of tulips and so forth. We have a few on hand right now, but normally by this time we're massed with them and they're expected any day. When I'm potting these things up, and because they're not here yet, if you decide to pot up right away, you can still make a little hole and put in. I like to put some tulips down deeper in the pot, and they'll stay there dormant until spring, and it's time for them to come out. And then they'll come through everything, and it's just spectacular. Now, this is a little species tulip that I tried, but most often, it's the next ones that I have. And this is the grouping one spring that I did these. And because I really enjoy the purples and the soft yellows in the violas and pansies, I like to repeat that color. And so actually this is just one of those bags of bulbs of the tulips. And also a few of the narcissus. And there is the kale that has come through the winter. And what I don't have is a picture that I often show you, that kale shoots up this really tall spike of yellow blossoms that lasts several weeks. And it's really spectacular. Now you say, what do I do with those tulip bulbs when they're finished? In actuality, because all those pansies and everything is growing so vigorously and it's not yet time, or I'm not ready yet to put the summer things in there, I just cut them off and I treat it as just a beautiful bouquet. Sometimes you just have to do that. All right, this is another one. That's a mixture. Now I put some little fancier tulips in that one. I think I tried to save those, but tulips aren't always dependable for coming back. Sometimes they do for 2 years, and after that, maybe not. Okay, we need to say, before we go to the next one, which is herbs, let me talk to you about a couple of other things. Where perennials are concerned, I absolutely love to use the grasses. I love to use the coral bells because they'll go through the winter beautifully. There's another plant out in the perennials that I'm fond of. If you plant it in the garden, it's got to have excellent drainage. It's like a lavender. It needs good drainage, and that's sedum. And this one is a neon because it's more pink. But there's several variations of color in this. This will be beautiful for several weeks, and then it will brown off as winter comes in. But it has presence in a container. Containers don't always have to be just full of flowers. It's a contrast of textures or leaf shapes or tones that are really interesting here also. So this can be enjoyed in the container in its vibrant color and left there even in its dry tone. It's really beautiful with the various grasses, particularly the one that Kelly brought up, but it's pretty with that one too. So it's useful. I like to talk about perennials and containers and what they can do, because most perennials have a period of growth, okay? And then the bloom, I mean, and then it's kind of finished as far as containers are concerned, but that doesn't apply to perennials that is there for the leaves and the color and the texture of the leaf, okay, particularly in the shade. Okay, let's talk just briefly, because we don't have much time left, about herbs. This is my herb garden, which is off the deck, close to my kitchen door, where I can enjoy it year-round almost. They're not, certainly not as vigorous in the wintertime, but some of them are. The thyme, the oregano particularly, but I love to have herbs in containers. And so I highly recommend that. And then the next picture is a close-up actually of thyme and oregano. I use these a great deal in my cooking. You can also see wisps of rosemary, which I also have there. And then the next picture, I love, this was a client's deck, and they had a planter built into the deck, and it was planted up with herbs. And I thought, wow, isn't that wonderful? Because it was just steps away from the kitchen, and it has sage, it has chives, it's got thyme, it's got oregano, and a number of other things that I can't recognize in the distance. But even that's going to be still attractive in the wintertime. And to make it even more attractive, you could add violas and pansies to that, and it would have some color. And by the way, violas and pansies are edible. I love to decorate with them. Okay, before we show my grand finale pictures, I do want to mention, and we did this last week, I believe I mentioned this, you need to keep on hand a roll of Harvest Guard. There are a couple of different brands. This one happens to be Harvest Guard. It's a very thin fabric that water will pass through, light will pass through. You can put it over things as long as you allow growth in the vegetable situation that's growing. And in the ground, you can actually pin it down with the sod pins. And I mention that only because I might not have the opportunity to later. This is a wonderful thing to use if frost is predicted and you want to protect some of your existing plantings, because it will help get through light frost. It's not going to do a whole lot for a heavy frost, but it will take you through the light frost. It's reusable, so it's wonderful to use in the fall, and it's also wonderful to use in the spring because we sometimes can get late frosts. Okay, you have to brace yourself for Clara. We have to do Clara. And so I helped them do little fairy gardens. And I gave Clara and Lydia, her little 2-year-old sister, the little pots. And I discovered very quickly that the little pots weren't satisfactory. I had to step it up and give her a little bigger pot. And as she said, she's 3.5. I need a little bigger piece of foam, because she knew it was foam that was holding her artificial flowers in. I gave them a lot of little artificial flowers to play with. And I intended to bring in one of them today, and I forgot it. She did a marvelous job, I thought. Oh my word. It was a beautiful arrangement, because she was very selective as to, I think something fell. She was very selective as to what flower she wanted to put in that pot, because she was accustomed to helping not just me with my containers, but her mother and her aunt, particularly Aunt Bridget. Okay, and then while I was going through some of these pictures, I came across the next one, and I just couldn't resist putting it in. Okay, we start young. From day one, this child was in the garden, and she loves to be in the garden. And that is Clara at a much younger age. But in the next picture, so they came to Fair Oaks a couple of weeks ago, and Lydia and Clara are shopping. Okay, so just that reminder.
I love your family, Peg. All right, are you ready to take some questions?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right. So we have a lot of questions coming in. Please feel free to send them to us. We have about 10 minutes to take questions. If we don't get to your question today, please feel free to hit reply on your confirmation email. That if you hit reply to that, it goes directly to me, and I'll send any questions you have after the class to Peg or to whoever needs it. If you have a question about something else, we can, that's fine too. We can send it on to David Yost or someone at the plant clinic or whoever. All righty, getting started. First question, is it true that mums are in the ragweed family?
I've never heard that.
I haven't either. That was interesting. I wonder if that.
No, I don't think so. No, somebody's trying to throw brick bats at the poor mom. Ragweed is one of the ones that people have allergies to, okay? I have never heard that. I'd have to look that one up.
Okay. All right. Next question. Do deer eat ornamental kale and cabbage?
Yes, ma'am.
They do. Okay.
Okay, that was another thing that I didn't cover. Unfortunately, and I have deer, okay? I use Bobex regularly, but you can't put it on your vegetables because you wouldn't want to eat them either. Now, in addition to Bobex, there are a number of other types of that you can spray with. I use this one consistently because if I used two, I wouldn't know which one was working anyway. And this works when you use it properly. Light rain does not wash it off, even a heavier rain, unless it rains for several days. What you do have to respray for, particularly in the spring, is new growth. And if you're growing daylilies and oriental lilies, you have to spray a little more often. But generally speaking, a good spraying will last at least 3 weeks and sometimes 4. But I have so many deer, I spray every 3 weeks, okay? I wouldn't have anything if I didn't. It's okay to spray all the things that you're not eating. Yes, they will eat any of the leafy greens, the kale, the cabbage, the vegetables. They will eat the petunias, they'll eat the pansies. They'll eat the coral bells. They don't eat the grasses. They'll eat the sedum. Ugh, they will eat. Yeah.
I have to see if we can get someone on to talk deer control, because I know Pat used to, but I think she's moved already. So maybe.
Well, there's a lot of things you can do to control.
Yeah.
Net, and that's really another program.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a whole program.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. At the end of the season, can I remove the annual plants and remove a third of the soil and reuse that soil the following year?
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay.
Unless you have something in it that was diseased, absolutely reuse the soil. The one thing that you do need to do is to go deeply into that soil and break it up right down to the bottom, because it's going to have a lot of roots in it. And you need to really break that up and incorporate that new soil into it, okay?
Got it.
It's not going to drain as well, and drainage is very important.
Okay. Okay, I just scrolled accidentally and lost my question. Here we go. Are calibrachoas similar to petunias? And can you talk about the light requirements, full sun versus, okay, we probably can't go back for all the plants and do the light requirements, but can you maybe point out some of the ones that were good for shade that you discussed?
Absolutely. Petunias, calibrachoa, also beautiful. Similar requirements, just a difference in the size of the flowers. anything that I presented here today will thrive if it gets full morning sun, full hot morning sun. The things that really need some shade need that shade in the afternoon in the hottest sun. So everything here will do well if it gets full morning sun.
Okay.
A lot of it will do well if it gets the whole day sun. The things like petunias and whatever here, we'll take that heat. Okay, no problem. Now, things that really don't like that hottest afternoon sun would be some of the coral bells. Now, people say they grow in full sun. For me, they do much better if they get a little protection in the afternoon, okay? And the grasses will do really well with dappled light or some shade. So those are great. As a trailer, the Lacemachia is fantastic in shade. All of these things, the ferns are beautiful in a shade situation. If you buy an aster that's budded, if you buy a mum that's budded, if you buy the peppers, put it wherever you want it to be right now, because it's going to do its thing regardless of where it is, okay? Hopefully that was a little helpful.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Okay, next question. Do you recommend mulch for planters? And does the mulch you would suggest vary by season, or is it a year-round thing?
Generally speaking, I don't use mulch. If I did, it would be probably the Virginia Fines. And certainly that kind of, there's two things that happen. It helps when you're watering to keep the dirt from splashing out. That's the main thing that I use it for. But what I really prefer, and I did not bring up with me, is the very small gravel. I like to use the 3/8 inch, either the little river rock, river stone, or the Seminole chips. I prefer those. That also helps to keep the water from splashing out. And you don't ever want to fill your container all the way to the top because you need room to water. But I like that very much. And the snails don't like the sharpness of that red 3/8 inch Seminole chips. Another thing that really is amazingly good is to mulch with pine needles, because the slugs don't like that either, okay? So yes, I do like that. I rarely put mulch, but certainly you can.
Okay. Let's see, next question. This is about kale. The kale plants that you've shown, are those edible, or are they strictly ornamental?
They are certainly edible. In fact, one can buy seeds of some of the ones that we normally use even in the vegetable garden. So yes, they are, unless you've sprayed them with Livex, and then they're not edible. Okay. Yeah, but I don't eat them. I use these for ornamental purposes, and then I plant the others in a small garden because I have so many deer, that is contained within deer fencing.
Okay. All right. Ooh, let's see what we got, because we got about 1 more minute. Okay. All right. To everybody who I'm not able to get to, please remember that we can follow up with you by email. I'm gonna go with this question because I think there's probably it's probably important for people who want to put their containers together. If they want their container to go through the winter, what size and depth would you recommend? Is there like a starting point?
Okay, I'd appreciate for those who are interested in that answer to tune in next Thursday, because we're going to address that winter thing very thoroughly there. And I don't have time to address that properly right now, because I have a lot of different kinds of containers and a lot of experience with which ones will usually winter well and which ones won't. Certainly the terracotta can break, and I'm aware of that.
Maybe depends. There's a few factors there.
Yeah, so I'm going to defer that until next Thursday.
Okay, that's what I wasn't sure if it was just like on at least 14 inches or if there's more to it than that.
No, you need a 14-inch container to get through the winter well, okay?
Got it. Okay. All righty. Let's see. We're out of time here. To the person asking if we can do a deer class, I will see what we can do. I'm like thinking about that right now. We will, as Peg said, be having a class where we're really going to discuss the containers and some of the foundations that go into making a good container. And we'll have Andy on to discuss that. For anybody, this is a bit of a topic switch, but for anybody who is interested in lawn care, David Yost is doing his plant clinic at 2 p.m. today on lawn care. You can either attend that or let me know you want the link. We'll send you a recording. And I think that's it. We will follow up tomorrow with your coupon and your recording from this class, and I'll make a list of the plants that Peg discussed for everybody so that you guys have that in your notes. I think that's it. Peg, is there anything you want to wrap up with?
Actually, I think that's it. Just go and do it.
Yeah, have fun. Enjoy the fall. All righty. Okay.
Season.
Thank you so much, Peg. Everybody, thank you for joining us. And again, please feel free to follow up with any questions you have that did not get answered. Thank you all, and I will see some of you at 2 o'clock. Everyone else, we'll see you next week. Bye.